My daughter, Chloe, held up that little piece of paper, and her scream of joy just about shook the walls of my small rented house. "I did it, Dad! I won!" she yelled, jumping up and down. For one perfect second, watching her face light up, I thought all our problems had just melted away. Then she used that money to buy the very house I was living in, just so she could throw me out on the street. Friend, my name is David, and I'm the father who was told he was no longer welcome in his own home. Before I tell you what happened next and how I learned the truth that changed everything, could you do an old guy a favor? Tap that subscribe button. It helps to know my story is being heard. She didn't even have the heart to tell me to my face. I just got a cold official letter in the mail. It was an eviction notice. It said I had 30 days to pack up my life and get out. Pictures of her late mother were on the wall, and the pencil marks from when Chloe was little were still on the doorframe. Now I was being told to leave it all behind. My hands were shaking so bad I could hardly read the bottom of the page, but I had to know who did this. Who was the cruel new owner? I just prayed it wasn't the person I thought it was. The name on that letter was Chloe's, my own daughter. But the coldness had started a few days before that, right after she cashed the big check. I took her to our favorite little diner in town to celebrate, the one with the worn-out red booths. I thought we'd talk about old times, maybe plan a small trip. But my daughter wasn't there anymore. A stranger was. She didn't talk about people, she talked about things. Mansions in California, fancy sports cars, designer clothes I'd never even heard of. I tried to give her some fatherly advice. "Chloe, honey, you should put a good chunk of that away," I said gently. "You need to be smart about this." She just looked at me from across the table like I was some old fool who didn't understand her new world. She gave me this thin, empty smile. "Don't worry, Dad," she said, her voice suddenly cool and distant. "I have people for that now. I've got it from here." In that moment, it felt like a wall of ice went up between us. I was looking at my daughter, but all I could see was a stranger wearing her face. Before I even got that awful letter from my daughter, Chloe, I received a phone call that made my stomach sink. It was from my landlord, Mr. Henderson. He's a good man who has owned this little house for 40 years, and he always sent me a card for my birthday. But when he called, his voice was shaky, like he was afraid to talk to me. "David, I'm so sorry," he said, sounding all choked up. "I had an offer on the house I just couldn't refuse. I had to sell." I told him I understood, that business was business. "So who's the new owner?" I asked, just trying to be friendly. "Can you give me their name?" And that's when he got real quiet. I can't do that, David," he stammered. "They were very clear about it. They want to handle everything themselves." I felt a chill go right through me. Why would the new owner be a secret? Before hanging up, he said one last thing. "Just be careful, David. Something about this whole deal just doesn't feel right." He was right. The very next day, that letter came, and I found out just how wrong it really was. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the letter. An eviction notice. After the strange call with my landlord, Mr. Henderson, I was worried, but I never could have imagined this. I read the words again, then a third time, hoping my old eyes were playing tricks on me. But the words didn't change. 30 days. It felt like a prison sentence. My whole world, everything I had built since my wife passed away, was inside these 4 walls. I collapsed into my old armchair, the one with the worn-out arms where my daughter Chloe used to sit. I tried to call her. The phone just rang and rang, each ring echoing in the silent, empty house. It went to her voicemail, her happy, cheerful voice telling me to leave a message. What message could I possibly leave? "Honey, why are you making your own father homeless?" I just couldn't say it. I hung up, feeling smaller and more alone than I ever had in my life. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a text message from her. My heart gave a little jump, thinking she was going to apologize. I was so terribly wrong. My hands were shaking as I opened the text message from my daughter, Chloe. I was ready for an explanation, maybe even an apology, but the words on the screen were colder than a winter night. All it said was, "Can't talk. The notice is real. It's just business, Dad. Just business." Those two words knocked the wind right out of me. All the years of raising her, loving her, sacrificing for her, was that all just business to her now? I immediately tried calling her back, desperate to hear her voice and prove that text wrong, but this time the phone didn't even ring. She had sent me straight to voicemail. She was shutting me out. I sank back onto the couch, the phone slipping from my hand and hitting the floor. For a few hours, I didn't move. I just sat there staring at the wall, the fight completely gone from me. How could I possibly fight my own child? She had all the money in the world, and I had nothing. It felt hopeless. But then, my eyes landed on the picture of my late wife, Sarah, on the mantelpiece. I remembered the promise I made to her. I wasn't going to let our family fall apart this easily. That night, I started to pack a few boxes. It was the saddest job I'd ever had to do. Every little thing I touched held a memory of my daughter, Chloe. I opened an old wooden chest and found her first pair of little red shoes. Underneath them was a photo album. I sat right there on the floor and opened it to the first page. There was a picture of me in this very backyard holding onto the back of a small pink bicycle. A 5-year-old Chloe was on the seat, her face a perfect mix of fear and excitement. "Don't let go, Daddy," she had squealed. I remembered my exact words back to her. "I won't, sweetie. I'll never let you go." Looking at that little girl's trusting face, a fire started to burn deep in my chest. Where was she? What had this money done to her? I closed the album, my sadness hardening into something else, something stronger. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about saving my daughter from the person she was becoming. I wasn't going to let go now. And just then a name popped into my head. A friend from long, long ago, a man who became a lawyer. His name was Ben, and he was my only hope. Ben's name was like a single candle in a pitch-black room. We had worked together at the old auto plant years and years ago, before he went back to school to become a lawyer. We lost touch the way people do. Life just gets in the way. Finding his number wasn't easy. I had to pull out an old dusty address book from a box in the closet. His name was still there, written in my wife's neat handwriting. For a long time, I just stared at the number. Calling him felt like admitting I had failed completely, that I couldn't handle my own family. My pride, or what was left of it, screamed at me not to do it. But then I looked at the eviction notice from my daughter, Chloe, sitting on my kitchen table. What was worse, swallowing my pride or being thrown out of my home? I picked up the phone and dialed, my finger shaking. A secretary with a very professional voice answered, "Law Offices of Benjamin Carter." I cleared my throat. "My name is David," I mumbled. "I'm an old friend of his." She told me he was very busy, but she asked me to hold. For a long, silent minute, I waited, listening to the quiet music. Sure, she would come back and say he was too important for an old mechanic now. Just as I was about to hang up, a familiar voice came on the line. It was Ben, my old friend. His voice was deeper, more confident now, but it was him. "Davy, is that really you?" he asked. He didn't hesitate for a second. He told me to come to his office the very next morning. His office was on the top floor of a glass skyscraper right in the middle of downtown. I felt like a stray dog wandering into a palace. Everything was shiny chrome and dark, polished wood. I looked down at my old work boots and felt so out of place. Ben came out from his office to greet me himself, shaking my hand with a warm, strong grip. He looked older, with a little grey hair now, but his smile was exactly the same. In his big, quiet office, I told him everything. I told him about my daughter, Chloe, winning the money. I told him about the eviction notice and the cold text message. I felt so ashamed, like I was telling him I had failed as a father. He just listened, his face getting harder and harder with every word I said. When I finished, he didn't say he was sorry. He just stared at the wall for a second, thinking. Then he looked right at me, and his eyes weren't friendly anymore. They were sharp, like a hunter who had just spotted his target. My lawyer friend, Ben, stood up and walked over to the huge window that looked out over the whole city. "The eviction notice is just paper, David," he said, turning back to face me. "It's a scare tactic. It's cruel, but it's not the real fight here." I didn't understand. It felt very real to me. My own daughter, Chloe, was about to make me homeless. Then what is the real fight? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ben walked back to his desk and sat on the edge of it, leaning in close. His voice dropped, and he sounded more serious than I had ever heard him. Forget about the house for a minute. Forget the nasty text messages, he said, his eyes locked on mine. We need to go back to the very beginning, to the source of it all. The whole room seemed to get quiet, and I could hear my own heart beating. Tell me this, David, he said slowly, and I need you to be absolutely sure about this. Where exactly did your daughter get the money to buy that winning lottery ticket? And in that one single moment I felt the world shift under my feet. Ben's question hung in the air of his fancy office. Where did the money for the ticket come from? My mind went blank for a second. Then a memory started to form, like an old photograph developing in the dark. It was from a few weeks before the lottery win. My daughter Chloe had come over to do her laundry. She was laughing about how she and her friends were all buying lottery tickets because the prize was so big. She was short on cash and asked me a question. "Dad," she'd said, "is there anything left in that old college account? It's just for a few tickets. It would be funny if I won." I explained it all to Ben. Years and years ago, when Chloe was born, I had opened a small savings account at the local bank. It was a joint account with both our names on it. I was the main owner, but she was on it too. Every single payday I put $20 in that account. It was for her future. We used most of it for her college books, but there were still a few $100s left in there. I looked at Ben, feeling a little foolish. I told her she could take $20 from that account, but that can't matter, can it? It was just $20. A slow smile spread across my friend Ben's face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a tiger who just found a way through the cage. "Oh, it matters, David," he said, his voice full of energy. "It matters more than anything." He explained it to me in simple words I could understand. Because the money came from a joint account where I was the main owner, the thing she bought with that money wasn't just hers. "Legally, David," he said, leaning forward, "that winning ticket is what we call a partnership asset. It belongs to both of you." My head was spinning. I came in here expecting a little advice, maybe some pity, but this was a weapon. "So, what does that mean?" I asked. Can I take the money back?" Ben shook his head. "Not yet, but it means we can cause a very big problem for her. It means we can freeze every single dollar." He looked at me, his eyes searching my face, making sure I was ready. "She started this war, David, but we have the power to put a stop to it right now, at least for a little while." He reached for his phone. "Are you ready?" I just nodded at Ben, my throat too tight to speak. He hit a number on his phone and put it on speaker. After a few minutes of hold music, a serious-sounding man from the bank's legal department came on the line. Ben was like a different person. He was calm, polite, but his words were like steel. "I'm calling on behalf of my client, David Miller," Ben said. "We are lodging a formal dispute over the lottery winnings deposited into his daughter's account." He explained about the joint account, the co-mingled funds, and the disputed asset. I didn't understand all the big words, but I understood the power in Ben's voice. He told the man at the bank that any money taken out of that account from this moment on would be considered theft. He demanded an immediate freeze on all of Chloe's accounts until the dispute was settled. The man on the other end tried to argue, but Ben cut him off. "Do it now," Ben said, his voice deadly quiet, "or our next call will be to a judge." There was a long pause, and then the man said he would comply. Ben hung up the phone and looked at me, the silence in the room feeling heavy. "Okay," he said with a grim smile. "It's done. Now, we wait." I left Ben's office feeling like my feet weren't touching the ground. My mind was a total blur. One minute I was a helpless old man getting kicked out of his house. The next I was a man who had just thrown a giant rock into a calm lake. I drove home in a daze, not even remembering the trip. I sat in my car in the driveway, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't know whether to feel scared or powerful. I didn't have to wait long to find out. My phone started ringing and the screen lit up with my daughter Chloe's name. I took a deep breath and answered. But it wasn't my daughter's voice. It was the scream of a wild animal. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice so loud and full of rage that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. The cold, distant woman who sent that text message was gone. This was someone I had never heard before, someone completely out of control. "My cards are all declined. The bank won't tell me anything. They said to talk to you. What did you do to my money?" Her voice was pure panic and fury, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one who was afraid. I listened to my daughter, Chloe, scream on the other end of the phone. All the pain and fear she had put me through over the last few weeks hardened into something solid inside me. I wasn't going to yell back. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to be calm. When she finally stopped to take a breath, I spoke, and my voice was as steady as a rock. "It seems we have something to talk about now, Chloe," I said. The silence on her end was a shock. I think she expected me to beg or apologize. Her sputtering rage started up again, but it was different this time. It was weaker. "You can't do this," she stammered. "You'll regret this. I'll sue you for everything." I just stayed quiet and let her yell. When she was done, she slammed the phone down. I lowered my own phone, and the silence in my little house felt different. It wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It felt peaceful. I had finally fought back. But as I thought about her panicked words, one thing she said stuck in my mind and sent a little chill down my spine. She hadn't just said, "I'll sue you." In the middle of her angry screaming, my daughter, Chloe, had yelled something that I almost missed. "Marcus says you can't get away with this. Marcus says he'll get the best lawyers and ruin you." When she hung up, the name just echoed in my head. Marcus. Who in the world was Marcus? She had never mentioned a Marcus to me before. She had been single for as long as I could remember, always focused on her work. Where had this man come from? And why was his name the first thing she thought of when she was in trouble? A new kind of worry started to creep in, pushing aside my small victory. I sat in my old armchair, the eviction notice still on the table next to me. This whole thing, her coldness, her cruelty, buying my house just to kick me out. It didn't feel like the daughter I had raised. It was too mean, too calculated. But what if it wasn't her idea? What if someone else was pulling the strings, whispering poison in her ear? I had a sudden, terrible feeling that I wasn't just fighting my daughter for a house anymore. I was fighting a stranger for my daughter's soul. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept repeating his name. Marcus. Who was he? I got out of bed and walked into the living room, the moonlight shining through the window. My eyes fell on the picture of my late wife, Sarah, on the mantelpiece. She had been gone 10 years now, but I still talked to her in my head sometimes. I remembered the last promise I ever made to her, in that cold, white hospital room. Her hand was so weak in mine. "Promise me you'll look after our girl, David," she had whispered. "Promise me you'll always protect her." I promised I would. Looking at her smiling face in the photograph, I felt a deep wave of shame. My daughter, Chloe, was in the hands of a stranger, a man who was turning her against her own father, and I was doing nothing. This wasn't just about money or a house anymore. This was about that promise. My fight to freeze her accounts wasn't an act of revenge. It was the only way I could get her attention, the only way to try and pull her back from whatever darkness she had fallen into. I had to save her. I owed it to the memory of my wife. I had to find out who this Marcus really was. The next afternoon, as I was washing dishes, a car pulled up outside my house. It wasn't a normal car. It was a low black sports car that looked like it cost more than my house. It purred like a panther before the engine went silent. I watched through the kitchen window as a man got out. He was tall, dressed in expensive clothes, and had a smile that looked like it was practiced in a mirror. He walked right up my driveway and knocked on my front door like he owned the place. My heart started pounding in my chest. I knew somehow, I just knew who it was. I opened the door, and he stuck out his hand. His handshake was firm, but his hand was cold. "You must be David," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm Marcus. I'm a good friend of Chloe's." A friend. He wasn't even admitting he was her boyfriend. He was already playing games. "I was hoping you and I could have a little chat," he said, that fake smile never leaving his face. "Maybe I can help clear up this whole misunderstanding." He was trying to sound helpful, but his eyes were like two little chips of ice. He was sizing me up, and I knew this was not a friendly visit. I let him in. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to see what this man, Marcus, was all about. He walked into my small living room and looked around at the old furniture and family pictures with a little smirk on his face, like he was visiting a museum. "Cute place," he said. He didn't sit down. He just stood in the middle of the room, making it feel small and crowded. "Look, David," he started, his friendly tone gone, "you're making a big mistake. You're hurting Chloe very much. She's under a lot of stress." He was trying to make it sound like this was all my fault. "This legal fight is a bad idea," he continued, his voice low and steady. "It's not going to end the way you think it will. It would be in your best interest and in Chloe's if you just dropped this whole thing and moved on." There it was. It wasn't a loud threat, but it was a threat all the same. He was telling me to back down. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Think about what's best for your daughter," he said. And then he was gone. I stood there, my body cold with a terrible, certain feeling. That man was dangerous, and he had my daughter wrapped around his finger. As soon as Marcus's fancy car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my phone and called Ben, my lawyer friend. My hands were still shaking from the visit. I told him everything. I told him about the cold look in Marcus's eyes and the threat that was hidden behind his smooth words. I told him how Marcus tried to make me feel like the bad guy, like I was the one hurting my own daughter, Chloe. Ben listened quietly on the other end of the line. "He's trying to scare you into backing down, David," Ben said. "It means we have him worried. It means we're doing the right thing." Then I remembered something else, something small that seemed off. "Ben," I said, "I asked him how he and Chloe met. He said they met at a charity event." Ben was quiet for a second. "And?" he asked. "And," I said, "Chloe hates those things. Ever since her mom passed away, she's never gone to a single charity dinner or event. She always said they felt fake." It was a small thing, a tiny lie, but it felt important. Ben's voice on the phone suddenly got very serious. "Good work, David," he said. "That's how you catch a liar. They always mess up the small details." My friend Ben's tone changed completely. He wasn't just my lawyer anymore. He sounded like a general planning a battle. "David, your job is to stay safe," he said firmly. "Don't answer the door if you don't know who it is. Don't talk to Marcus. Don't even talk to Chloe for now. Let me handle this." He told me he was going to hire a private investigator, a professional who could dig into Marcus's life, someone who could find out where he came from, what his real job was, and if he had ever done something like this before. The thought of a private investigator scared me a little. This was getting bigger and more serious than I ever imagined. It wasn't just a family fight over money anymore. We were investigating a man I knew almost nothing about. Hope started to bubble up inside me, but it was mixed with a big dose of fear. I was putting all my trust in Ben. Before he hung up, his voice turned grim. "Listen to me," he said. "If this guy is the kind of person who lies about something so simple, your daughter might be in more danger than we even know." While Ben started his secret investigation, Marcus and my daughter Chloe started their own attack. It wasn't a legal one, it was one aimed right at my heart. My phone started ringing, but it wasn't Chloe. It was my sister, Carol. Her voice was cold. "David, I can't believe what I'm hearing," she said. "Chloe told me everything, how you're trying to steal her money after all she's been through." I tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. An hour later, my cousin called, saying the same thing. Marcus and Chloe were poisoning my own family against me. They were painting me as a bitter, greedy old man. They were telling everyone that I was jealous of her happiness. The worst call was from my brother. "She said you were never there for her," he said, his voice full of disappointment. That one broke me. I had raised Chloe by myself after Sarah died. I had worked 2 jobs to make sure she had everything she needed. And now, she was telling our family I was a bad father. The walls were closing in, and I felt utterly and completely alone. Was everyone I loved going to turn against me? The days after the phone calls from my family were some of the loneliest of my life. I felt like the whole world had turned against me. I continued packing my things into old cardboard boxes, my heart feeling heavier with each one. I was packing up the books from the living room when I came across an old box that belonged to my late wife, Sarah. I hadn't opened it in years. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were her favorite novels, a dried flower from our wedding, and her old reading glasses. Tucked inside her favorite book was a faded photograph of a very young Chloe, sitting on my lap while I read a story to her. Beneath it, in my wife's beautiful handwriting, was a little note. It said, "He will always be your anchor in any storm, sweet girl, never forget that." Tears streamed down my face. An anchor. That's what a father was supposed to be. Marcus and Chloe could spread all the lies they wanted, but I knew the truth. I knew who I was. I wasn't a thief. I was an anchor, and my daughter was in a storm. My sadness hardened into resolve. I was about to call Ben when my phone suddenly started ringing. It was him, and he had news. I answered the phone, my heart pounding. "David," Ben said, and his voice was grim. There was no friendly chatter. He got straight to the point. "The investigator got his first hit. It's not good." I sat down on the edge of a packing box, bracing myself. "What is it?" I asked. "It's about Marcus," Ben said. He took a deep breath. "David, your daughter's boyfriend, Marcus, he doesn't exist." I was completely confused. What did he mean? He doesn't exist? I saw him with my own 2 eyes. He stood right here in my living room. "Ben, that's crazy. He was here. He threatened me," I said, my voice shaking. "I know," Ben replied, his voice low and serious. "But Marcus is a fake name. It's an alias. The man you met is a ghost. He created that name a few months ago. There are no records for him, no driver's license, no credit cards, nothing before that." My blood ran cold. This was worse than I thought. This wasn't just a bad boyfriend. This was a professional liar, a con man. The question caught in my throat, but I had to ask it. "Then who is he?" I whispered. "Who is the man living with my daughter?" There was a pause on the other end of the line before Ben spoke again. "His real name is Jonathan Stryker," he said, and the name itself sounded dangerous. "Our guy dug into his past. He has a record, David. Not for anything violent, but for fraud. He has a history of this." Ben explained that Jonathan Stryker was like a predator who could smell money. He had a pattern. He would find people who had suddenly come into a large inheritance, or in this case, lottery winnings. He would charm them, make them fall in love with him, and then he would do exactly what he was doing to my Chloe. First, he would isolate them from their families, making the family seem greedy and untrustworthy. Then he would get control of their money, and once the money was gone, he would disappear, leaving them with nothing. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. This whole time I was angry at Chloe, my daughter. I thought money had made her cruel, but it wasn't her. She was a victim. She was a lamb in a wolf's den, and she didn't even know it. I had to warn her. I had to get her out of there before it was too late. My anger at my daughter, Chloe, vanished in an instant. All I felt was a cold, sharp terror. She was in a house with a professional con man, a predator, and she thought he loved her. She was in terrible danger. "Ben, I have to call her," I said, my voice choked with panic. "I have to warn her right now." Ben tried to tell me to wait, to think it through, but I wasn't listening. I hung up and immediately dialed Chloe's number. My heart was a drum against my ribs as I listened to the phone ring. I prayed she would pick up. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Then the ringing stopped. "Hello," a man's voice said. It was him. It was Marcus, or Jonathan, or whatever his name was. He had answered her phone. "Where's Chloe?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. "I need to speak to my daughter." There was a little chuckle on the other end of the line, a sound that was so full of arrogance it made my skin crawl. "Chloe's a little busy right now," he said in his smooth, silky voice. "Is there a message I can give her?" He was toying with me. He was showing me he was in complete control. "Put my daughter on the phone right now," I said, my voice low and dangerous. The fake politeness in his voice disappeared in a flash. The mask was off. "She doesn't want to talk to you, old man," he sneered, his words dripping with poison. "You've caused enough trouble. You had your chance to walk away quietly, but you wanted to play games. Now you'll see what happens." Before I could say another word, the line went dead. He had hung up on me. I tried to call back, but the phone just rang and rang. He wasn't going to let me talk to her. He was her keeper. I sank into my chair, the phone feeling heavy and useless in my hand. It was worse than I ever could have imagined. This man, this Jonathan Stryker, wasn't just influencing her. He was controlling her completely. He answered her phone. He was probably reading her text messages and listening to her calls. My daughter wasn't just in a bad relationship. She was a prisoner in her own life, a prisoner in a golden cage, and she didn't even know it. The eviction, the money, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was getting her out. But how do you save someone who doesn't know they need to be saved? I called my lawyer, Ben, back immediately, my hands trembling as I told him that Marcus, Jonathan, had answered Chloe's phone and cut me off. Ben was quiet for a moment. "He knows we're onto him," he said grimly. "He's going to make his move now. He's going to try to get that money and run." Just as he said that, there was a loud knock on my front door. My heart jumped into my throat. I peeked through the window and saw a man in a uniform holding a clipboard. He was a courier. I told Ben to hold on and cautiously opened the door. The man handed me a thick envelope and asked me to sign for it. As soon as he left, I tore it open. Inside was a stack of legal papers. "Ben, are you there?" I said into the phone. "He's already making his move." It was a court notice. Chloe's new high-priced lawyer had filed a motion for an emergency hearing to have all her accounts unfrozen. The court date was set. It was in 2 weeks. The conman, Jonathan Stryker, had just started a ticking clock. We had 14 days to find a way to save Chloe before he got his hands on every last penny. I read the court papers to my friend Ben over the phone. 2 weeks. That's all we had before a judge decided whether to give that monster, Jonathan Stryker, access to all of my daughter's money. "Our claim on the joint account is good, David," Ben said, "but it might not be enough. A judge might just see this as a family squabble and unfreeze the funds. We can't risk that." My heart sank. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice feeling weak. Ben was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. "We have to change the story," he said finally. "This isn't a fight about money anymore. This is a rescue mission. We need to prove that Jonathan Stryker is a danger to your daughter." He explained that the best way to do that was to show that he has a history of doing this to other people. We needed to show his pattern. "We need to find one of his other victims, David," Ben said, his voice hard as stone. "We need someone who can stand up in court and tell the judge exactly who that man is. We need to find a ghost." Ben told me that his investigator had already been digging. He had found a name connected to one of Jonathan Stryker's past scams, a woman named Amelia Vance. Stryker had taken her for her entire inheritance a few years ago, but there was a big problem. After Stryker had destroyed her life, Amelia had disappeared. She was living under a new name, hiding from the world. The investigator had found a possible address for her in a tiny, quiet town in Ohio, hundreds of miles away. He tried to talk to her, Ben explained, but she slammed the door in his face. "She's terrified. She won't talk to a lawyer or a PI. I felt the hope draining out of me. "So it's a dead end," I said. "No," Ben replied slowly. "Not yet. She won't talk to a man in a suit who she doesn't trust." He paused for a second. "But she might talk to another victim's father. She might see you and see a reason to finally fight back. David, I think you have to be the one to go. You have to be the one to find her and convince her to help." The weight of his words settled on my shoulders. I had to go find a stranger and ask her to face the monster who ruined her life. The next morning, before the sun was even up, I was on the road. I had a thermos of coffee, a full tank of gas, and an address for a small town in Ohio I'd never even heard of. The highway stretched out in front of me, a long grey ribbon cutting through the endless fields of corn. With every mile that passed, I felt more and more alone. I was just an old man in an old truck on my way to go find a ghost. I was scared. I didn't know what I would say to this woman, Amelia Vance. How could I ask her to relive the worst time of her life? But every time I thought about giving up and turning around, I saw my daughter Chloe's face in my mind. Then I would see the cold, dead eyes of Jonathan Stryker. I thought of the promise I made to my wife, Sarah. After 8 hours of driving, I finally pulled into the little town. It was quiet and sad-looking. I found the street and pulled my truck over to the curb in front of a small, neat house with the curtains all drawn shut. I turned off the engine, and the silence was deafening. This was it. I just sat there for a long time staring at that front door, trying to find the courage to save my daughter's life. I finally took a deep breath, got out of my old truck and walked up the little path to the front door. My knuckles felt heavy as I knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. I was about to turn around and leave when the lock clicked and the door opened just a crack. A woman with tired, fearful eyes peered out at me. This had to be her, Amelia Vance. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested," she said, her voice quiet but firm. She started to close the door. "Please wait," I said, my voice coming out raspy. "I'm not selling anything." She stopped but kept the door on the chain. "My name is David Miller," I said. "I drove here from out of state because my daughter is in trouble." The woman's face didn't change. She still looked at me with suspicion. I knew I only had one chance to make her listen. "She's with a man," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "A man who calls himself Marcus." Her eyes narrowed. I leaned in a little closer. "But his real name is Jonathan Stryker." The moment I said that name, all the color drained from her face. Her eyes went wide with a horror I recognized because I felt it in my own heart. The door chain rattled as her hand started to shake. Amelia Vance unhooked the chain and slowly opened the door, letting me into her small, bare living room. She looked like a ghost, haunted by a past she could not escape. I told her everything. I told her about my daughter, Chloe, the lottery, and the man who had turned her against me. As I spoke, I saw her expression change from fear to a deep, sad understanding. When I was finished, the room was quiet for a long time. Then she began to talk. Her story was like a perfect echo of my own. Jonathan Stryker had come into her life like a dream. He was charming and loving, and he made her feel like the most special person in the world. Then the little games began. He told her that her family was trying to control her, that they didn't really love her, that he was the only one she could trust. "He made me fire my family's financial advisor," she whispered, her eyes staring at nothing. "He said he would manage my inheritance for me." She told me how he drained every account, took every penny she had, and when there was nothing left, he just disappeared. "He took everything," she said, tears finally rolling down her cheeks. "My money, my family. He left me with nothing but shame." Listening to Amelia's story broke my heart. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was someone who understood my pain perfectly. I told her about the court date and that we needed her help to show the judge who Jonathan Stryker really was. Her whole body tensed up with fear. "No," she whispered. I can't face him again. He'll destroy me." I thought it was over. I had failed. But then something inside her seemed to shift. Her fear slowly turned into a cold, hard anger. "He can't be allowed to do this again," she said, her voice growing stronger. "He can't destroy another family." She stood up and walked over to an old wooden chest in the corner of the room. From the very bottom, she pulled out a dusty shoebox. "I was too afraid to go to the police," she said, placing the box on the table between us. "But I didn't get rid of everything." She opened it. Inside were printed emails, fake investment statements, and legal papers he had tricked her into signing. Tucked at the bottom was a small USB drive. "I recorded him once," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "He was threatening me." She pushed the box across the table toward me. "Take it," she said. "Take it all, and go stop him." I drove the 8 hours home with that shoebox sitting on the passenger seat, like it was a case full of gold. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like we had a real chance. This woman, Amelia Vance, had given me the weapon I needed to fight back. The whole way home, I felt a mix of hope and a growing sense of urgency. The court date was getting closer every day. The moment I walked through my front door, I called my lawyer, Ben, and told him I had everything. He was overjoyed. But my happiness didn't last long. Sitting on my doormat was another envelope from my daughter Chloe's lawyer. I ripped it open. Inside was not a threat, but an offer. It was a check for a small amount of money, enough for a deposit on a new apartment. With it was a letter saying that if I signed the papers, dropped my legal claim, and was out of the house in 48 hours, the money was mine. Jonathan Stryker was getting nervous. He knew a court case was risky. He was trying to buy me off, to get rid of me cheaply and quickly. He wanted me gone before I could expose him. I looked at the check in my hand. A few weeks ago, this small amount of money would have seemed like a lifeline. Now it felt like an insult. I called Chloe's lawyer and left a simple message. Tell your client the offer is rejected. We will see him in court. It felt good to say. I knew my message would get back to Jonathan, and it would make him even more nervous. I had poked the bear, and I was ready for a fight. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. My heart skipped a beat. I opened the message. There were only 8 words. Is it true what you said about him? I stared at the screen, my hands starting to shake. It had to be her. It had to be my daughter, Chloe. My words from our secret meeting must have planted a seed of doubt in her mind. She was questioning him. She had found a secret way to contact me, a way around the monster who was controlling her. It was the first crack in his wall of lies. My daughter was still in there somewhere, and she was reaching out for help. I knew I had to be careful. Jonathan was surely watching my daughter's every move. I couldn't text back anything that would put her in danger. I thought for a long time, and then I remembered the old public library downtown. When Chloe was a little girl, we used to spend every Saturday there, at a small, quiet table in the back corner. It was our special place. I typed back a simple message to the secret number. Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m., our old table. Then I waited. The next day was the longest of my life. I didn't know if she would get the message. I didn't know if she could even get out of the house by herself. I worried it might be a trap set by Jonathan. At 10 minutes to 3, I walked into the quiet library and sat down at our old wooden table. My heart pounded with every person who walked past. 3 o'clock came and went. She wasn't here. My hope began to crumble. But just as I was about to give up and leave, I saw her. She was standing by the entrance, looking thin and pale, and more scared than I had ever seen her in my life. My daughter Chloe walked slowly toward my table in the back of the library, looking around like a scared animal. She sat down across from me, but she didn't look at me. She just stared at her hands, which were twisting a napkin into knots. He thinks I'm at the grocery store, she whispered, her voice so quiet I could barely hear her. I had to lie. He checks everything, Dad. My phone, my emails, my credit card bills. He controls everything. She finally looked up at me, and her eyes were full of a fear so deep it made my own heart ache. He told me you were the enemy, she said, her voice trembling. He said you were bitter and jealous, and that you were trying to steal my money and my happiness. The brainwashing was even worse than I had imagined. He had twisted her mind until she didn't know who to trust. I wanted to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I could see how fragile she was. One wrong move and she might bolt, running right back to the monster who was destroying her. I had to be so careful. He tracks my car, she whispered, her eyes darting toward the window. I can't stay long. I knew I couldn't just dump all the proof from Amelia Vance on her. It would be too much, too fast. She would be too scared. I needed to give her one simple truth that she could check for herself, a little seed of doubt that she could water on her own. I leaned across the library table, my voice just a whisper. Chloe, listen to me, I said. The man you are with. His name is not Marcus. She stared at me, her face a mask of confusion. What are you talking about? She asked. His real name, I said slowly and clearly, is Jonathan Stryker. He is a con man with a criminal record for fraud. I let the words sink in. I could see the battle in her eyes, the fear of believing me versus the fear of what it would mean if I was telling the truth. Don't take my word for it, I pleaded. If you ever get a moment alone on a safe computer, just look up that name. I knew I had to give her something more, a way to contact me, a lifeline. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small cheap cell phone that I had bought at the drugstore that morning. It was a pay-as-you-go phone, not connected to any plan or any name. A ghost phone. "Take this," I whispered, sliding it across the table. "Hide it. Keep it turned off unless you need to use it. He can't track this phone. If you're in trouble, if you need me, you use this to call me." Her hand trembled as she reached out and slipped it into her coat pocket. "I have to go," she said, her eyes wide with fear as she stood up and hurried away without looking back. I stayed at the table, my heart pounding, praying I had done the right thing. After a minute, I walked over to the large library window that looked out onto the street. I watched my daughter get into her car and drive away. But then my blood ran cold. Parked on the other side of the street, half hidden behind a truck, was a familiar black sports car. It was his. He had followed her. He had been watching the whole time. My secret meeting wasn't a secret at all, and I realized with a wave of terror that I hadn't just given my daughter a lifeline. I had just put her in more danger than ever before. My blood turned to ice in my veins. He saw us. That monster, Jonathan Stryker, had followed my daughter, Chloe, and he saw our secret meeting. I ran out of the library and jumped in my truck, my mind racing with terrifying thoughts. What would he do to her? I drove straight home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I had to call Ben. I had to tell him what happened. I pulled into my driveway, fumbling for my house keys, and ran to the front door. But when I put the key in the lock, it wouldn't turn. I tried again, thinking I was just shaking too much. It still wouldn't budge. Then I saw it. Taped to the door was a piece of paper. It was a notice, written in thick black marker. It said, "This property is now under the control of the owner. All previous residents are trespassing." He had changed the locks. That monster had illegally locked me out of my own home. It wasn't a legal eviction notice this time. It was a raw display of power. He was showing me that he could do whatever he wanted. And all I could think about was, if he could do this to me, what was he doing to my daughter? I stood on my own porch, homeless and helpless. My clothes, my memories, my wife's picture, everything was locked inside. My own family thought I was a greedy old man, so I couldn't call them. I had nowhere to go. With a heavy heart, I made the only call I could. I called my friend, Ben. I told him what happened, my voice cracking with defeat. "He changed the locks. I'm locked out, Ben. I have nothing." Ben didn't even hesitate. "Don't you worry about that," he said, his voice firm and steady. "You're staying with me. I'm on my way." He picked me up and took me to his beautiful house in a fancy neighborhood. He gave me a guest room that was bigger than my entire living room. He told me to make myself at home. I was so grateful, but I also felt a deep sense of shame. I was an old man who had to be rescued by a friend. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the big, comfortable bed, staring at the two phones on the nightstand. There was my own phone, which was silent, and then there was the cheap burner phone, the twin to the one I gave Chloe. I just stared at it, praying it would ring, praying that she was okay. Late that night, I was lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, when a strange ringing sound cut through the silence. It was the burner phone. My heart leaped into my throat. I snatched it from the nightstand. "Chloe," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Are you there?" But there was no answer. All I could hear on the other end of the line was a soft, whimpering sound. It was the sound of someone trying to cry without making any noise. It was my daughter. My blood ran cold. Then I heard something else in the background, a man's voice muffled but full of rage. It was him. It was Jonathan. He was yelling at her. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the anger, the poison in his tone. He must have found out about our meeting. He might have even found the phone. My daughter was in a room with that monster, and he was hurting her, and all I could do was listen, miles away, completely helpless. "Chloe?" I whispered into the phone, my voice breaking. "Chloe, are you okay?" But the only answer was the sound of her silent tears. I listened to the terrible sounds on the phone, my heart breaking into a million pieces. My daughter, Chloe, was crying, and a monster was yelling at her. I felt so helpless, like my hands were tied. "Chloe, can you hear me?" I whispered desperately. "Tell me what's wrong." Her crying hitched for a second. Through the sobs, I heard her force out a few broken words. It was so faint I could barely hear it. "Doctor's appointment. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. It was a message. It was a cry for help. Before I could ask her where, the line suddenly went dead. He must have taken the phone from her. I was left in the total silence of the guest room, clutching the small phone, with those few words ringing in my ears. A doctor's appointment. Tomorrow at 10. It was the only clue I had, the only chance I might get to see her, to get her away from him. I jumped out of bed, my mind racing. I didn't care what time it was. I ran out of the room and banged on my friend Ben's bedroom door. "Ben, wake up," I yelled. "I know where she's going to be. We have to go get her." Ben and I spent the rest of the night planning. We didn't know which doctor, so we looked up the biggest medical building in her part of town. Our only hope was that she would be there. The next morning, we were in the parking lot at 9 a.m., sitting in Ben's car like a couple of detectives, watching and waiting. My stomach was in knots. Every car that pulled in made my heart jump. Then, at a few minutes before 10, I saw it. The low, black sports car. Jonathan Stryker's car. It pulled into a parking spot not far from us. My heart sank when I saw that he was in the driver's seat. He was bringing her. "This changes things," Ben said calmly. "We can't just run up to her." He thought for a second. "Okay, here's the plan. I'm going to create a distraction. He knows who I am. I'll get him talking about the court case. It will give you a few minutes, David. Just a few minutes to talk to her." Ben got out of the car. As Chloe stepped out of the passenger side, Ben walked right up to Jonathan's window. It worked. Jonathan was so surprised he rolled down the window and started arguing with Ben. This was my chance. I got out of the car and ran toward my daughter. "Chloe," I said, my voice coming out as a breathless whisper. She turned and her eyes went wide with shock and fear when she saw me. She looked even thinner and paler than she did at the library. "Dad, you can't be here," she hissed, looking back at the car where the man who called himself Marcus was distracted by Ben. "He'll see you." I grabbed her by her shoulders, my hands trembling. "Chloe, you have to leave him. Now. We can go. Ben and I will protect you. He is a criminal, honey. His name is Jonathan Stryker." I expected her to run with me. I expected her to be ready to escape. But instead, she just shook her head, a look of pure despair on her face. Tears filled her eyes. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why?" I pleaded, my heart shattering. "Why can't you leave him?" She looked down, her hand going to her stomach in a way I hadn't noticed before. "Dad," she choked out, the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I can't leave. I'm pregnant." The world just stopped. Pregnant. My daughter Chloe was pregnant. For a second, all the air left my lungs. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the slight change in her body that I had missed. This changed everything. This monster, Jonathan Stryker, didn't just have a hold on my daughter anymore. He had a hold on my grandchild, on the future of my family. I felt a wave of protective anger so strong it almost knocked me over. This wasn't just about saving Chloe anymore. I had to save that baby from being born into that man's world of lies and cruelty. I looked over at the car. Ben was doing a good job of keeping Jonathan distracted, but I could see Jonathan's face getting red with anger. He was getting impatient. We only had a few seconds left. I looked back at Chloe's tear-stained face. I could see the trap she was in. She felt like she had to stay with him now, because of the baby. He had chained her to him. I knew right then that planting a small seed of doubt was not going to be enough. I had to show her the whole ugly truth, right here, right now. There was no more time to be gentle. I had to break his spell over her completely. I pulled out my own phone, my hands shaking as I swiped through the pictures I had taken of Amelia Vance's proof before I left Ben's house. "He doesn't love you, Chloe," I said, my voice low and urgent as I held up the phone. "He's a liar." I showed her the picture of a legal document proving his real name was Jonathan Stryker. I showed her the fake investment statements he had given Amelia, promising to double her money. "He did this before, to another woman," I said, my words coming out in a rush. "Her name is Amelia. He took all her money and left her with nothing." The last thing I showed her was the message I had typed out from Amelia's audio recording. She stared at the words on my phone. "You tell anyone and I will ruin you. No one will ever believe you." My daughter's face crumpled. All the lies, all the little doubts, all the fear, it all came crashing down on her at once. The truth, in all its terrible ugliness, was staring her right in the face. She finally saw him for the monster he was. Just as the truth hit my daughter, Chloe, I saw Jonathan shove past Ben and start getting out of the car. His face was a mask of pure fury. We were out of time. "Get in the car, Chloe," I said, my voice firm. "Now." I grabbed her hand and pulled her toward Ben's car. For just 1 second, she was frozen with fear. Then she broke, and she ran with me. We scrambled across the parking lot, my heart pounding in my ears. "Chloe!" Jonathan screamed from behind us, his voice full of rage. Ben had the car started and the back door open for us. We dove into the car, and I slammed the door shut just as Jonathan reached us. His face was pressed against the glass, twisted and ugly, screaming words I couldn't hear. He banged his fists on the window as Ben hit the gas. The tires squealed on the pavement as we sped out of the parking lot, leaving him standing there, a small figure of pure hatred in the rearview mirror. I pulled my sobbing daughter into my arms, holding her tight. She was shaking, and she was terrified, but she was free. Ben didn't drive us back to his house. He knew that Jonathan Stryker was angry and unpredictable. Instead, he drove us to a small, clean apartment in a quiet part of town that I had never seen before. "It's a place I keep for emergencies," he explained as he unlocked the door. "No one knows about it. You'll be safe here." The moment the door was locked behind us, my daughter Chloe completely broke down. All the fear and shock and heartbreak came pouring out of her in a flood of tears. She cried for hours and I just held her, my own heart breaking for her. She told me everything. She told me how he had slowly and carefully turned her against me, twisting my words and making me seem like a monster. He told her I was just jealous of her new life. "He said you were dead to me," she sobbed into my shoulder. "He said I had a new, better family now. And the worst part is, I believed him." Hearing those words was like a knife in my gut, but I just held her tighter. The woman I was holding wasn't a cruel stranger anymore. She was my little girl, lost and hurt, and she had finally come home. She was safe, at least for now, but the court date was still coming. The morning of the court date, my daughter Chloe was a nervous wreck. She was pale and couldn't eat anything. I made her some toast, but she just stared at it. "I don't know if I can do this, Dad," she whispered. "I don't know if I can face him." I sat down next to her and took her hand. It was cold as ice. "I know you're scared," I said softly, "but you are the strongest person I know. Your mother was a fighter, and so are you. I'll be right there next to you the whole time." We walked into the courthouse together, with Ben leading the way. And then I saw him. Jonathan Stryker was already there, standing with his expensive lawyer. He was dressed in a perfect suit, looking calm and confident like he didn't have a care in the world. He had no idea we had Chloe. He must have thought she was still his prisoner, that she wouldn't dare show up. When he saw her walk in and sit down next to me, his smug smile disappeared for just a second, replaced by a look of pure shock. But then, it came back. He caught Chloe's eye from across the room and gave her a small, cold smile. It was a final threat. We all sat at a large polished table in front of the judge. The room was quiet and serious. Jonathan's lawyer went first. He stood up and began painting a picture of me as a greedy and bitter old man. He told the judge I was jealous of my daughter Chloe's success and was trying to steal her money out of spite. He made it sound like Chloe was the victim and I was the monster who was trying to control her. I had to sit there and listen to all these terrible lies, my hands clenched into tight fists under the table. I could feel Chloe shrinking in the chair beside me. It looked like we were losing. It looked like the judge was believing him. Then it was Ben's turn. Jonathan and his lawyer both leaned back, looking confident. They thought Ben was just going to argue about the old joint bank account, but Ben didn't do that. He stood up, tall and strong. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing through the quiet room, "before we discuss the finances, we need to address a more urgent issue." He paused and everyone leaned in. "I would like to file a motion regarding the fraudulent representation and criminal endangerment of my client's daughter, Ms. Chloe Miller." A ripple of shock went through the courtroom. Jonathan Stryker's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor, this is a financial hearing. Mr. Miller's lawyer is trying to turn this into a circus." But the judge held up a hand, his eyes narrowed with interest. "I'll allow it," he said, his voice stern. "Continue, Mr. Carter." My friend Ben then laid out the entire story. He told the judge about the fake name, Marcus, and revealed his client's real name, Jonathan Stryker. He presented the proof of his real identity and his criminal record for fraud. With every piece of paper Ben placed in front of the judge, Jonathan's face got paler and paler. His lawyer kept objecting, but the judge waved him off each time. Ben described Jonathan's pattern, how he targets people who come into money and isolates them from their families. "This isn't a simple family dispute over lottery winnings, Your Honor," Ben said, his voice ringing with power. "This is the latest act of a career criminal who is preying on an innocent woman." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And Mr. Stryker's pattern of abuse is not just a theory. We have a witness." Jonathan Stryker let out a short, ugly laugh. "A witness?" his lawyer scoffed. "Who could you possibly have?" He looked over at my daughter, Chloe, with a smug look, thinking she was too broken to speak against him. But Ben wasn't looking at Chloe. He turned and walked toward the large doors at the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor," Ben said loudly, "we call Amelia Vance to the stand." He opened the door, and the woman I had met in that tiny house in Ohio walked in. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her head was held high. She looked directly at Jonathan. The confident smirk on Jonathan's face vanished. It was replaced by a look of pure animal shock. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. His mask was gone. For the first time I saw the real man, and he was terrified. He was looking at the woman he had destroyed and left for dead, and she had come back. My daughter, Chloe, stared at Amelia, this stranger who had suffered the exact same way she had. I felt Chloe's hand find mine under the table and squeeze it hard. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a survivor. And she wasn't alone. Amelia Vance sat in the witness chair, and a strange calm came over her. She spoke in a clear, steady voice, and the whole room was completely silent, hanging on her every word. She told her story. She described how Jonathan Stryker had charmed her, how he had promised her the world, and how he had slowly convinced her that her own family was trying to hurt her. She explained, step by step, how he took control of her inheritance, and then vanished, leaving her bankrupt and alone. As she spoke, Jonathan started to fall apart. "She's lying!" he suddenly screamed, jumping up from his chair. "She was obsessed with me. She's crazy." His lawyer tried to pull him back down, but it was too late. He was losing control, his cool, confident act completely shattered. The judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Stryker, you will be silent, or I will have you removed," he boomed. But Jonathan couldn't stop himself. In his panicked rage, he started shouting details about Amelia's finances. Things only the person who had stolen the money could possibly know. He was confessing, right there in front of everyone. He had just hammered the final nail into his own coffin. Jonathan Stryker stood there in the middle of the courtroom, his ugly words hanging in the air. His own lawyer just sank into his chair and put his head in his hands. He knew it was over. The judge stared down at Jonathan, his face like thunder. He banged his gavel, and the sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. "That's enough," the judge roared. "I've heard enough." He threw Jonathan's lawyer's case out completely. He ordered that my daughter Chloe's accounts were to remain frozen, but that I was to be given immediate access to help her manage them. But he didn't stop there. He looked straight at Jonathan. "As for you, Mr. Stryker," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet, "based on the evidence and testimony I've heard today and your own revealing outburst, I am referring this entire case to the district attorney's office for a full criminal investigation." As he spoke, 2 uniformed court officers started walking toward Jonathan. The look on the con man's face was something I will never forget. The confidence, the arrogance, the cruelty. It was all gone. All that was left was a small, pathetic, cornered man. We watched as they put his hands behind his back and the handcuffs clicked shut. We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright sunshine. My daughter, Chloe, was leaning against me, her body still trembling, but she was smiling for the first time in months. Amelia Vance came over and gave Chloe a long, quiet hug. 2 women, 2 strangers, united by the pain one man had caused. Ben drove Chloe and me straight back to my little rented house. The nasty, handwritten trespassing sign that Jonathan had taped to my door was still there. The new locks he had illegally installed were still in place. Ben had already called a locksmith who was waiting for us. While the locksmith worked on drilling out the old lock, Chloe walked up to the front door. Her face was set with a quiet determination. She reached out with a trembling hand, grabbed a corner of the hateful sign, and ripped it off the door. She didn't stop there. She tore it into tiny, tiny pieces, letting them fall from her fingers onto the porch steps. It was a quiet, simple act, but it felt like a great victory. Just then, we heard a loud click. The locksmith had opened the door. My home was my home again. We stepped inside the house, and it felt like we could finally breathe. All the tension, all the fear was gone, but the wounds were still there. That afternoon, my daughter Chloe and I sat in my old living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. For a long time, we just sat in silence. "Dad," she finally said, her voice choked with tears, "I am so sorry." She cried and apologized for everything, for the eviction notice, for the terrible things she said, for believing his lies over her own father. I pulled her into my arms. "It wasn't your fault," I whispered, my own eyes filling with tears. "That monster got into your head. That wasn't you. It wasn't a magic fix. Our relationship wasn't suddenly perfect again. There was a long road ahead of us, a lot of trust to rebuild. But for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, we were a family again. All I cared about was that my daughter was safe and that my grandchild would now be born into a world of love, not lies. We had a new beginning, and we would face it together." Months passed by. The seasons changed, and the terrible memories began to feel a little more distant. My daughter, Chloe, and I worked on rebuilding our family one day at a time. The lottery money was still there, but it was no longer a curse. It was a tool. Chloe, stronger and wiser now, started a foundation in Amelia Vance's name to help other victims of fraud. She was turning her pain into something good, and one sunny afternoon in spring, our family grew. I sat in my old armchair, the same one where I had felt so hopeless, and I held my baby granddaughter Lily in my arms for the first time. She was so small, so perfect. She had her mother's eyes and a grip on my finger that felt as strong as an anchor. As I looked down at her, I felt my late wife, Sarah, there in the room with us, smiling. All the anger and fear I had felt were gone, replaced by a love so big it filled my whole chest. Jonathan Stryker was in jail, awaiting a long trial he was sure to lose. He couldn't hurt anyone anymore. I looked at little Lily, and I made a quiet promise to her, just like I had made to her grandmother. "I will always protect you," I whispered. Always. Life settled into a peaceful new rhythm. My days were filled with the happy sounds of a baby, and my evenings were spent on the porch, watching the sunset with my daughter. The house was no longer just my house. It was our home again. One evening, my phone rang. It was my friend, Ben. "Just calling to check on you, David," he said. "How's life as a grandpa?" We talked for a few minutes, laughing like old friends. "I'm glad you're happy," Ben said before he hung up. "You deserve it, you've done a good thing." But then he paused. "Speaking of doing good things," he said, his voice becoming more serious, "I just got off the phone with Amelia Vance. She's a different woman, David. She said you inspired her to stop hiding." He told me that Amelia was now ready to fight her own battles. She wanted to go after the ex-husband who had hidden millions from her during their divorce years ago. "She thinks he moved the money somewhere overseas," Ben said. "She asked if I knew anyone who was good at finding things that were supposed to stay lost. And for some reason, David, I thought of you. Friend, thank you for staying with me to the very end of my story. It means the world to an old man to finally be heard. If you believe that family is worth fighting for, and that strength isn't about how you fall, but about how you get back up, then please do me a kindness. Tap subscribe and join our community. You won't want to miss the stories we share next. It seems my life isn't quite as quiet as I thought it was going to be, and there are still people out there who need a little help. I've picked out another story just for you, one I think you'll understand, and you should be able to see it on the screen right now. I hope to see you there."